Welcome to another episode of Take the Hill, a podcast dedicated to connecting you with leaders demonstrating significant leadership within their respective fields. So Dennis, Angelo, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Hello. Welcome. So we have a very special guest here today, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. But I want us to reflect upon, the idea that, we certainly should not diminish, I think, the lessons and the loss and human experience over the last year. Yet at the same time, now more than ever, we need to begin turning into the wind and looking forward towards the horizon. Our guest today embodies this ethos. His passion and his energy typifies the vibe that is infused within the hospitality industry, and especially the restaurant and hospitality scene within the Pittsburgh area. And the reality is, quality is never an accident. Right? It's the result of an intelligent effort. And I firmly believe that. And Michael, who is here with us today, his intelligent effort and keen attention to detail has positioned him as a staple in the restaurant scene here in Pittsburgh. And we are honored to have with us today Michael Goldberg in the studio. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks.
It's a real pleasure to have you here today. So for our listeners, like you said, it's that attention to detail. And we were discussing this before the show a little bit as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into the industry?
Sure. I've been in the hospitality world since I was about 16 years old when I started working at a Pizza Hut, and worked my way up from doing dishes to eventually managing restaurants. I did a lot of managing here in Pittsburgh. And then I moved away and moved to New York City. Lived in New York City for about 10 years. And there I worked in and out of the hospitality business, but always dealing with customer service. I worked in a modeling agency as well as doing restaurant work. But I really kind of honed my skills working in the theater district in Midtown Manhattan, in a very busy restaurant, and worked my way up from server to bartender to becoming maitre d' and eventually a manager. I did that at quite a few restaurants that I worked at, and just kind of over my career, I've done that at quite a few places. And then after I left the modeling agency, I became known as a fixer. I decided to go back to restaurants and got a name as a fixer, and so people would hire me to rework what was maybe they feel they could be doing better with customer service, and became a real kind of expert in that world. And so every place that I've worked since then, I've been kind of that person. How can we make the guest experience better? How can we make the employee experience better? And how can we grow that into a better, more efficient kind of way?
Excellent. And that experience, no doubt, probably has left some lasting impressions, both in terms of how you operate today, or even just growing, within the industry itself. What was it like making the jump from Pittsburgh to New York right out of the bat?
It was definitely a shock. I mean, there's definitely a different way of, kind of everyday living that happens in New York City. I like to tell people that, New York City is a place where, you have a choice about what you wear. And once you walk out your door, nothing else is your choice, because you're, in a lot of ways, assaulted by a lot of things that you may not have encountered in the place that you grew up or where you're originally from. And so there's a lot of things that you're just, kind of forced into doing. It's a very fast-paced city, so you have to, that's something you have to adjust to very quickly. It was definitely a shock, but it was definitely, the first time that I visited New York, the energy and the vibe coming off of that city was something that really kind of captured me and said, I have to find a way to, make some money and move here. And I did. So.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, or Michael, I had a quick question. Not to get off track here, but, and again, just to kind of help our listeners understand, and maybe to help myself understand since I'm not in the industry. But when you say you're the fixer, that just takes my mind right to like in Restaurant Impossible, or what's the name of the show, or something like
Yes,
that.
yeah, and that is exactly how I kind of think of myself. And recently, right before kind of pandemic happened, I started my own company called Brave Hospitality, and it came out of that desire for me to do that, and also requests of other industry colleagues that had been calling me and asking me to be involved in certain projects over the years. And those were jobs that I took as a GM or a food and beverage director. And then it became, when I left the Oaklander hotel, I started getting phone calls, and friends were calling me, asking me for advice and asking me for, hey, can you consult on this project to help fix this fast casual restaurant that's kind of struggling. And so, it came out of that thing, that I have a really great kind of innate ability to be able to see the bigger picture, which I think is, a number one kind of leadership quality that you have to have, is being able to look at the bigger picture and kind of remove yourself from it. And so I learned that very young. I would even say I learned that when I was, 16, 17, looking at, my managers and being able to see how they manage the people around them, seeing where their struggles were, seeing what I liked about how they responded to me as a server or a dishwasher or whatever. And then thinking, how could I do that better? And I'll say, when I lived in New York and I decided, I was working at a modeling agency and decided to go back to restaurants, I said, how can I be the best manager that I would want? And so every job that I've had since then, I've always tried to remove myself from it, my ego from it, and look at myself and say, how am I the manager that I would want? And if not, how can I change to be a better manager? So so I have been asked to come in and look at budgets, and look at food costs, and look at service standards, and say, what are we, people said to me, what are we doing wrong? How can I fix this?
That's such an important aspect of leadership, specifically across industries, that you had at such an early age. The fact that you're able to have that holistic perspective, but then also you're very introspective, right? And the fact that you could tell when your ego might be out there a little bit too much, especially in a field where that might be pretty prominent. How do you get to that point? Because I would imagine, if you're just take a kitchen or even behind a bar, details are very important. Time is very important, and customers could be a little demanding. All right.
Yeah. I think, it took me a long time. It took me a long time to get to that, and really for it to become like, second nature for me. But it took a lot of making mistakes. I mean, that was the biggest thing. Was I made a lot of mistakes, especially as a young manager, managing people that were, that were next to me behind the bar, or next to me as a server, or next to me as a host. And now I'm their boss, and we're the same age, and it was hard. It was really hard, but I knew that I was asked to do that role for a reason, and so I had to be open to saying to myself, like, you're just yelling at people, and that's not how we want this to evolve. Like, we want, you were asked to do this because of what skills. And I really had to take really long, hard looks at myself to say, why did, this owner or this manager, ask me to be a manager? And I had to say, well, they asked me because I have great customer skills. They asked me because I'm a team player, and I'm willing to jump in and collaborate with people whenever that is needed, And so I had to remind myself, I had to start finding ways to, and I still do this to this day, start finding ways to share my experience in the way I attack certain goals or tasks, and start trying to teach people how to do it for them, and say, how can I approach this so that they can pick this up and somehow understand it, and maybe they can find their own way to get there.
Michael, I'm also a little intrigued here by this fixer
Yeah.
Fixer role. And I too was starting to think of all these like entertaining shows that really kind of display that in the restaurant hospitality industry.
Mhm.
I am curious though, as this self-described and by many others fixer, have you ever come across a problem in the industry that you couldn't fix, or what was your biggest challenge as a fixer if you have been successful through each endeavor?
Yeah, yes, yes to both those things. I think that, yeah, there's definitely been, jobs that I've taken, especially when I moved from restaurants into being a food and beverage director of a hotel, where I was overseeing not only, restaurant operation, but now I'm overseeing an event operation also, and that adds a whole other kind of layer onto it, because now I'm working with not only my own team, but I'm working with a much bigger team. And so yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I had, I think, coming along the way, was that I was really great at customer service. That was very clear. It's just an innate ability that I have and I possess. But it became, how do I translate that into creating more covers, creating more revenue, making this more efficient, budgeting correctly, budgeting so that we can grow, budgeting so that we're not kind of downing ourselves. And that is really where probably my biggest challenge was being able to take that and put it into a really kind of technical aspect and an analytical aspect, and find a way that I could understand it that would be able to translate, to a bottom line and a flow through for business.
And
Michael, oh, I'm sorry.
just to finish that thought, because this fixer thing really is intriguing, because I feel like there are fixers in every industry. They're needed.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really intrigued by this, but it also sounds exhausting. And that's kind of what I want to ask you about, is like, how do you maintain that role? It sounds, I mean, for people to count on you constantly to fix the problem that is maybe having people lose their jobs or the entire business go under. That's a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
man. How do you deal with that?
It is, and I think that, I mean, I put a lot of pressure on myself. That's obvious, because those are roles that I've taken. But I've also, I love a challenge, and I've always been really a manager, especially. But I've always been a person that if there's a challenge in front of me, I'm going to attack it, and I'm going to attack it in a lot of different ways. And I think that that's another great, kind of aspect of a great leader, is being able to be adaptable, right? And so it's like, it's being able to remove I've been hired for this role, and then I've been asked to do these tasks. So now I have to find a way to remove my own ego to be congratulated, right? Because that's not really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is to run an efficient business that is creating revenue, essentially. And so I got to find ways to do that. And for me, that comes through being adaptable and being able to welcome change rather than resist change. And I think a lot of managers, especially in the restaurant industry and hotel industry, are used to doing roles in a certain way. And and a lot of managers in this industry end up in those roles without any formal kind of training. There's a small group that do end up there, and there's of course programs that herald being having those degrees, but a lot of us end up being there kind of by taking a right turn somewhere and end up in those positions. And I think that it does sometimes become about ego for a lot of people. And that always set me apart. I never understood those people, but I use them as a tool to find out, okay, what are they doing that works and what are they doing that doesn't work? And then I'm going to do all the things that's not working so that it works for me. And that was adaptability for me. And that's a huge, core factor of how I manage and how I try to teach managers that I've led and that have been part of my team. You've got to be adaptable. You can't take everything, to heart. You can't take it personal. You got to remove yourself from the situation. I was telling a friend the other day, a lot of my staff, a good many of the staff that I've worked with have come to me in the middle of a shift or after a shift to express concern or frustration, or they're like in the middle of it and they're like panicking, and I just look at them and they're like, well, are you going to say anything? And I'm like, yeah, I just don't have an answer right now, because at the moment they're acting from an emotional place, right? And so I have to be adaptable to know that's an emotion that I may not necessarily agree with, or I may agree with in the moment, but I got to remove myself from it. I got to look at what the real struggle is here. And is this, for me, it always comes down to, okay, is this something that I've created? Have I created this culture? How can I fix it? How can I, guide this person through it? And, or how can we change it? And so those are the things that I always think about, especially before I, respond, or before I really kind of, lead a staff to a different place. For me, it always comes down to being adaptable to change and being able to say, hey, let's try this. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then we change it. We change it to something that works and something that's more efficient.
Hey, Michael, this fixer is the key word for the day. As if we had the sign come down, key word for the day, fixer. But,
Fixer. Yeah.
I think Patrick brought up I really loved what Patrick said at the beginning, and I don't know if I'm going to quote him exactly correct, but he said quality is not an accident, but it's a well thought out strategy. And
Right.
I had a friend who was a restaurant individual who was very prominent in the restaurant business years ago, and then he ran the culinary school and blah, blah, blah. But he used to talk to me about some of these things. And the one thing that he always told me is the profit margin being so tight in the
Yeah,
restaurant business,
absolutely.
that you even how you cut your cheese or cut different things makes a difference on whether or not you make a profit or not, or how you cook your dinners, whatever.
Sure.
But my question would be, and I've also heard that there's these people that like to throw around money and own a restaurant so they can bring people in to eat for free, and they really shouldn't be in the restaurant business.
Yeah.
And especially today with what we're dealing with, even makes it tougher. Now, I know this is going to go away. I'm just talking in general. But as a leader, when you begin to advise individuals, or you walk into a place and you realize this person shouldn't even, their name shouldn't even be on the ownership of this restaurant. They should.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Well, I mean, that has been something that has it's been interesting. It's been interesting for me, because before, I was hired to be in a role, and I was hired for that, and a lot of times I would sit in interviews, or there was a few jobs I would be interviewed and maybe not get the job the first time, but when the person that did get the job wasn't, performing the tasks that they needed to, they would come back to me and say, hey, like, you're the person that we need. And so the ball was always kind of in my court, right? And now being a consultant, being asked to come in and look at things, a part of my process is spending a lot of time talking to owners and managers, and then staff, and finding out, what people are enjoying about their job, what they're not enjoying, where the struggles are, where they feel the struggles are, and then really kind of listening. And then I put together, a proposal. In my proposal, I vaguely outline kind of what I think needs to change. And as I approach it, I think people who have gotten to know me, and people that maybe hire me to do consultant work, know that I'm a straight shooter. There's no kind of messing around. And so, like, if you're going to ask me, how do I do this? Well, do you want the real answer? Because here's the real answer. The real answer is that you got to change your name. The real answer is that you have too many things on the menu. The real answer is that you're so, you're so personally driven by your own experience that you're not actually seeing what the real problems are, and that you have to kind of you have to remove yourself from it and look at the bigger picture, because, and so I'm very upfront about that. I had one client who just kept telling me that, he had been in the business for 30 something years. And I said, that's great, but that's obviously not working here. And I had to just come out and say that to him. And he goes, well, you're right. And I said, so do you want to change? Because if you don't want to change, then we can close up and I'm out. You know what I mean? But you know, if you want this business to survive, here are the things that you have to do. And this is all from my personal experience. And this is from, you know, the years of me working. And, you know, I also tell people that everything's interconnected. A lot of people think it's just about food cost, right? Or a lot of people think that they're buying things that are too expensive, cheese that's too expensive, or meats that are too expensive. And then they're not charging enough. And I'm like, well, that comes down to a lot of other things. You know, what is the market that you're in? What area of town are you in? What does that usually support? Do you have competitors in that area? And so it's again, it's for me taking a look at the really big wide picture. And you know, I do this a lot. I always look at the wide picture of things, and then I scale down to, okay, let's get down to the specifics. Let's work from the specifics. And if we start at the smallest part of this, the smallest detail, that will start to inform how everything else happens.
Yeah, this is a really valuable discussion, Michael. And I think, you know, our audience is definitely going to appreciate this, you know, because we talk about how you started in the dish room, washing dishes, and you worked your kind of way all the way up. And having that experience enables you to have, I think, that holistic appreciation, as well as being able to then jump down into the details and navigate those two completely different environments, but in a way that's really effective. How does that knowledge, or how does that then there transform in your experience to having those courageous conversations? Because I know, in speaking with, you know, individuals throughout various of industries, you know, they may be very direct, and they may have that experience and that background, but still sitting down and telling somebody, you know what, you got to change your name, you got to change your food, all right, this is not going to be sustainable. How did you get comfortable, even though you were good at that, how did you get comfortable having the actual conversations?
For me, it came to really taking a hard look at the experience that I've had, the places I've worked, and I say that I really did do this. I took my resume and I looked at every place that I worked, and I tried to remember every role that I filled while I worked at that place. And I remembered, okay, these are the things, you know, and then I wrote down kind of like little, you know, kind of adjectives as to, you know, these or actions, as these are the things that you did there, and this is why you got this position. And so then I looked at all those words and realized here are the things that I'm good at, right? And I realized that through, you know, I think sometimes as managers, we just get into this like management thing. We're just supposed to be managing, whatever that means, but we kind of forget what that actually means. And then we also forget what we're actually good at. You know what I mean? Like I was not good at budgeting really until I started working in hotels, because I didn't necessarily have to do it a lot, because when I was GM of restaurants, you know, there was a corporate head that kind of oversaw that, and they just kind of guided me and pushed me to say, you need to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, I can create more covers. I know how to squeeze more people in on a Saturday night. Like, I can do those things. Those are skills that I have. But when I became a consultant, I had to really take a long, hard look and say, okay, like, if somebody approaches me to do this thing, am I actually good at that thing, or am I not? And so when I really took a long, hard look at the things that I'm really good at, then I said, okay, well, you know, I know I'm good at these things. So if people hire me and you ask me about something that pertains to that, I'm going to say, well, this is what it is. You know, this is the right thing to do, or we should try this. We should go this direction. And it gave me really the confidence to be able to sit in front of people and say, you know, I don't know how to do that, but we can figure it out together. You know, and I've always been that person also. I come from, you know, a performance background, and I come from, you know, a place of collaboration, and that's a passion of mine. It was a passion of mine when I was a performer, and it's in a you know, a theater director and whatnot. But it's really a passion of mine now. I work better in collaborative environments. I think I work better on collaborative teams, and so I always try to create some kind of collaboration with, you know, and that to me is, you know, I walk into work and I don't see, I see everybody collaborating together that evening, a successful evening in a restaurant, or a successful operation in a hotel, or, you know, a successful event, only goes by everybody collaborating together, and me trusting that everybody on that team can perform the job, you know, that they were hired to do. And if we are all doing that, then we're going to be successful, you know. And so I don't really see, even if we may miss the mark a little bit, I still see it as a success, because we found out what we're not good at, right? We found out collectively where we're missing. So, okay, next time we do this, then we need to add this aspect in. We need to add this skill in. We need to hire somebody that can do this, because I can't do that and this person can't do that. And so we're missing, we have a missing link here. And so I see those as opportunities, rather than, you know, wallowing in us failing in some kind of way, you know?
Hey, Michael, I have a quick question. And everything we've been talking about today is transferable to other businesses. I hope our listeners understand that. It isn't just about restaurants, but as a teacher of business, you know, I used to, years ago, I guess you could see that I have a great beard, so I've been around for a while. And, but anyway, you know, the old school was to teach profit, profit, profit. And, you know, I don't teach that anymore. I'm not sure I ever did, but the old school professors did. But I teach about, and I don't know if you know the term, but triple bottom line, which includes people, planet, and profit. And what it's saying is that you can't have one without the other. So I guess when you start dealing with some of these restaurant owners or business owners, and they're all about profit, 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 because I could tell just by the way you're talking that you embrace the triple bottom line concept. So as you're dealing with these individuals and they're fighting with you saying, no, no, profit, profit, how do you convince them that people are, they contribute to your bottom line, they contribute to the profit, or, you know, being aware of your surroundings and your community, bring profit or contribute profit to the bottom line? How do you fight that resistance?
You know, I don't know that I know how to answer that fully. I don't know that I know how to articulate it fully, because I do believe in that. I do, you know, I constantly tell people I work with that, you know, that everything is interconnected, from how we hire people and what that process looks like, what that process feels like, to how many covers we have on a Saturday night. Those two things are definitely connected for me, you know, because if I constantly remind people that, you know, it's not about just getting more people in the door. It's about how do we create a great culture and an environment where people want to come in and then they want to bring people back, you know. And I remember when I got hired at the Ace Hotel, you know, there was a lot of concern about really finding a way to get more covers, right? And finding a way to boost, you know, lunch service and dinner service. And I said, I don't know that I have the answer for lunch. Lunch is a weird enigma. It depends on what city you're in and what you're surrounded by. You know, that dictates a lot of lunch service, especially in a restaurant. And then, you know, but it becomes, for me, it became about, I can increase covers, and I can do that by starting to look at, you know, what are we offering? How can we be creative about what we're offering? And how are we better marketing ourselves, you know? And I think that's a new, it's not a new business thing, but it's coming to a forefront, right? It's coming to the forefront of like, how are we better marketing ourselves? And not just in the traditional ways, not putting up billboards or ads in newspapers or magazines or, you know, online somewhere, but how are we using our teams to market? Because that's really what is going to create, you know, especially in hospitality, that's what creates people coming back. That's what creates great reviews on Yelp and TripAdvisor and Google. And that's what kind of creates that buzz that we start talking about. And, you know, especially here in Pittsburgh, you know, I've worked you know, I worked for Big Burrito, I worked at the Ace Hotel, I worked at the Oaklander Hotel. And, you know, though a lot of what I did there was creating a great environment that people knew the type of service they were going to receive when they arrived. And, you know, because of that, I had people that would follow me from one restaurant to another restaurant to the hotels and would come and stay. And it was because they knew the type of environment that I could create with my staff. And they knew that at the background, I was always driving that culture and that environment. And that's ultimately won a lot of, you know, my you know, the people above me that were looking at those bottom lines and saying, how can you create more profit from us? I was like, well, I'm going to do what I know best. And this is what I know best. I know customer service best. And I'm going to continue driving that. And if I continue driving that, other things will start to fall into place. And it will also give me the ability to really look at, you know, what is actually happening here. You know, okay, now we need to add more things to a menu. We need to take things off, or we need to add other kind of programs that will help boost what, you know, a check average will look like at the end of the night, you know. And so that is how I have always approached it, is by doing what I do really well, and then starting to say, you know, this is what I do well. You hired me for this, you had problems here, I'm going to attack those things. Here's how I'm going to attack those things. And things I don't know how to attack, I'm going to figure it out. You know, I'm going to figure it out by seeing, like, you know, let's see how this works. And if I can get us to a stabilized place, then I can start to really assess how we can really amp this up, you know.
Michael, similar to the fixer element of this, I'm now becoming, I'm perseverating on the consultant aspect of this, because to me, it's really intriguing, and specifically the dynamic. Here's what I want to kind of pick your brain on. And Patrick mentioned something about asking courageous questions, or, you know, in terms of, like, maybe you need to say, like, hey, do you need to change the name of this, or whatever. I would actually even challenge, I wonder, and I'm asking you, you know, I feel like that conversation could potentially be a little bit easier because you're coming from the outside in as a consultant. Like, you could say those things and not really care about hurting somebody's feelings, right? It's kind of your job. So I think there's probably some advantages to those elements, being an outside consultant, a third party that doesn't have to worry about necessarily, like, saying hi to them the next day if you hurt their feelings, right? What are some of the challenges, though, as not being part of that team, maybe the entire run? You're there for a brief, you know, glimmer of time to help them get on their feet, and then you're gone. That's what my impression is of this consultant role. What are the challenges then, if there are some advantages, it seems?
I think the biggest challenge is longevity, right? Is being able to take what, you know, the fixes that I've proposed, and making sure that there's longevity in them, and making sure that they're sustainable for the team that is working there, and also making sure that you know, it fits the identity of that particular establishment. You know, also the way I look at things is, I've never approached any job that I've had as the one before. You know, I look at it as, okay, what's interesting about this job, you know, and what's different. And so I'm going to take it for this environment and this team that's currently here, and I'm going to become a part of this team for whatever amount of time, whether I was there for years or months, and I'm going to make this better. And then I'm also going to try and make it sustainable. You know, I'm going to show them the possibility. I'm going to say, here's the possibility, and here are the ways that I did it. You know, here's the detail of how I did it. Here are the things to pay attention to. When you hit a snag, it's fixable. You know, I mean, I'm of the belief that there's nothing that doesn't have a solution, you know. And so I think that there are solutions to everything. It may not be the solution that we want or that we think it is, but there is a solution, and there is a way to work at it. And sometimes part of that is thinking way too big, right? And so I think that a lot of people that are looking specifically for a consultant, I think in most businesses and industries, is that, you know, you hit a snag, you hit a wall a little bit, and you're like, something's not working. So we need an outside perspective, and we need somebody that can take the time out of the day to work with our teams to overcome this hurdle a little bit, right? And I think a lot of it is, especially management, is thinking way too big and broad a lot of times, and they have to remember the small details. And that's the job I take as a consultant. That's how I see myself. I'm like, I start looking at the, you know, I do a lot of listening. So I start really listening to how people talk. You know, I think it was, you know, Maya Angelou, and I'm going to paraphrase here, that said, you know, it's not about what we say, but it's about what we do that we're going to be remembered by, right? You know, and I think that there's something to be said for that, you know, finding a way to make people remember us, and by creating a feeling, a vibe, and also really just for them knowing that they're being heard, and that their frustrations are being heard, and their successes are being celebrated, and finding ways to make all those things apparent to, especially, you know, a business that might be struggling a little bit. It's a lot of work, and it definitely has, it can be challenging sometimes, but really making people hear that, and then saying, here's how I did that, you know, here are the skills. And so I hand over a lot of what my process is to my clients, so that they can see, and I ask that everybody be a part of it. You know, I ask that, again, I work in a collaborative way. So I'm not taking teams into separate rooms and giving them secret ways of how to work around managers to you know, meet a goal or a task. I'm doing it with everybody in the room, and I'm making sure that management is aware of what we're doing. And I want everybody to have a say, you know, and I want to know what has been done in the past, and what has been, and was that successful, or why wasn't it successful, and how can we maybe approach it from a different angle.
How much of this role with consulting, how much like proactivity is involved in terms of like I feel like there would need to be so much research that's needed. Like before you even walk in the door, what are you even starting this process with? Like, are you looking into the company, the people, the city, like what all goes into it before you even step in the door? It seems like it'd be a lot.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a research nerd, so I get really geeky about you know, kind of research and picking things apart, and I love that aspect of everything, really. But yeah, I do take a lot of time. I tend to go to that, if it's a restaurant, I tend to go to that restaurant pretty frequently, or I spend time watching it, driving past it, sitting outside of it, kind of creepy, I guess, but just kind of seeing how a day plays out. How guests go in and how they come out, how people interact with each other. You know, I've gone in and, you know, had lunch, dinner, breakfast, you know, whatever. I've done that at the restaurants that I've worked at that I was managing myself. I spend a lot, you know, of time working inside restaurants to see, you know, how my team is handling situations, how, you know, how guests are responding, how frequently we're busy, when are the busiest times, because then that starts to inform how we attack certain goals, like, you know, how do we boost covers, how do we boost you know, check averages, you know, things like that. And it comes down to that bottom line again, like how can I boost that? Well, I got to know when we're busy. I got to know when those things happen. So it is a lot of time, but it is something that I enjoy, and I think that it's needed. It's needed for me to sit and see how customers are responding to what an establishment is doing, and how you know, and kind of following that at different times, and then being able to say, well, you know, I saw this happen during lunch, you're busy here, during, you know, dinner, nothing happens until this time, or you always have a line at the same time of day. How can we make that line spread out over time, you know? And so yeah, and then I take a look at market. I take a look at the market that they're in. I take a look at competitors and what are other competitors doing that are making them busy or are accomplishing goals that this business is trying to accomplish. And then I start, and then I do the same thing there. I start watching what's going on there. I go there and I have dinner or lunch or breakfast, and I start saying, okay, I see what they're doing. And I say, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense here, you know?
Hey, Michael, mine's more of a comment, but I think you have one of the best jobs in the world. How can I get involved in this? Because I love to eat. But anyway, I'm just kidding. That would be cool. But I think your message really speaks loud for other leaders, that they would take the time to observe, to listen, to make themselves available to just, just to be there, not always shouting, yelling, or I'll tell you what, I've been in leadership positions, and the best quality or the best thing that I did was just listen and just observe. And I'll tell you what, it gave me more answers and answered more questions than anything. So that was more of a comment. So I applaud you. And I think that our listeners could really benefit from that. And if you do need an assistant, I'll give you my email at the end of the show.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
can do some tests today.
Okay. You know, I thanks. I mean, I also, you know, I'm of the belief, and you know, this is where, you know, the name for my company, Brave Hospitality, kind of came from. It came from, you know, a poem by a really great poet by Micky Scottbey Jone, and she has a poem called "An Invitation to Brave Space," and it really is. You know, in it, towards the end of it, she really says, you know, this is not going to be perfect, but it will be a safe space and it will be our space. And so, you know, for me, you know, in becoming a consultant, I was like, what can I do? And what are my core beliefs? And for me, it is about being brave. You know, I've been brave in the roles that I've fulfilled. I've been brave in my career path, getting to where I am today. And it wasn't perfect. And I'm not perfect. I'm a flawed human, but, you know, but I do try to be as brave, and I try to be present, and I try, again, to, like you said, listen as much as possible, you know, and I take a lot of time doing that in the places that I worked, and I take a lot of time, you know, assessing, you know, what is really valuable in what's being said here. What can I pick out of this that are common threads that a lot of people at these establishments are saying, and how can I attack that, you know? And that's really where a lot of the keys come from. For me is, you know, really sitting down. That's why I talk to managers and owners and customers sometimes, and, you know, and of course, you know, the staff at an establishment, because when you see the through line and you see them saying the same things, sometimes that's the key, that when you're in it, you can't hear all the time because you're in it and you're worried about, you know, the operation, the day-to-day of it. And sometimes the outsider's like, you know, everybody is saying this, and why, you know, and I've asked, why hasn't that happened yet? Or why does this keep happening? And that's where the unravel starts to happen, right? And so for me, that's what I always research to find, and that's why I love that aspect of my job, because I love finding that nugget and being able to say, okay, here's the core thing that is really causing the wall that we keep hitting. So let's backstep, okay? Because, you know, I usually don't start there, but I backstep and say, okay, what is that? And let's go all the way to the beginning. And let's go all the way to, you know, some of it comes down to, you know, establishments not really explaining what the goal of the establishment is, right? And what the business goal is, and what the owners might have in mind, and what is the kind of demographic we're looking to bring in here, and are we getting that? And if we're not, well, maybe we need to change that part of how we market ourselves and how we talk about it, because you know, sometimes that happens, you know, and so it's about, for me, it's about working a little bit backwards and really, like you said, listening and finding those little, you know, pieces that go, okay, these are the common threads that everybody is talking about.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. So we're going to give you one last tough question, I think is going to kind of make you look over the horizon a little bit. From your experience, you know, I'm really hoping by, like you said, by next summer, we really start to see the reemergence of kind of whatever will become the new normal. What opportunities do you think the industry has to kind of create a really new and unique experience from your perspective?
You know, I think that that's a really hard question to answer right now. I think that the industry has received so little guidance and really big support in a lot of ways, and you know, it was really frustrating at the beginning. And you know, talking to friends and colleagues of mine, we're in a really difficult place. You know, we're in a really hard place because there's a lack of kind of value for what we do as an industry at large. We kind of all feel, and then there's also a lack of people actually seeing through to the real, through every aspect of the industry, you know, from, you know, creating grants and whatnot is wonderful and it's great, but it's like, how does that really affect, how does that affect, you know, a small restaurant that has 10 employees, and you know, how does that overall affecting the industry, and how are we distributing those things, and how are we tackling it? And I think that, you know, that part is really uncertain right now, because you know, big corporate business was looked at from the beginning, but you know, our industry was kind of left behind a little, and we were left to kind of gather ourselves and find ways to survive. And you know, and a lot of us are mourning those that didn't survive, you know. And I think that moving forward, I think the one thing that will keep our industry alive and really bring it back, I think, is you know, people like you know, myself and people that are running, you know, successful takeout or curbside businesses now. Those people that still have the passion for hospitality is what's going to make this this industry survive. And I think that they're the ones who are going to rebuild it, because the ability and the desire to want to return to work, and the desire to maybe want to change that concept a little bit and change the way that maybe we operate is really what's going to sustain us all. I really think that, you know, and I think that, you know, I've had friends that have shut down their business and haven't reopened. I've had other friends that have closed, you know, and I've other friends that adapted really quickly, you know. And I have to say, the people that adapted really quickly was out of a desire to still their passion kept them driving, right? And I'm not saying that the other people weren't as passionate. I just think that it was such a shock to all of our systems that, you know, if we can latch on together and again collaborate with people that still have that passion for hospitality, that's really what's going to bring us back.
Awesome. So, Michael, I think you have, over the last 50 minutes or so, ran a gauntlet of some pretty difficult questions, which you've responded fantastically. So we're going to give you a little easier one to kind of
Sure.
maybe start to wrap up the show. So we're moving into the holidays, and over your shoulder, we can see this fine collection of spirits and wines. So we want to know, what's your favorite holiday drink? What are some recommendations perhaps that we should be considering?
Oh yeah, I you know, my favorite holiday drink would really probably be a Moscow Mule. I love a ginger drink. I love ginger and vodka together for sure, and you know, just add a little fizzy soda on top of that, and that's to me, that's the perfect holiday.
All right, and it's okay in a solo cup, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I have a 16-ounce one, so you know.
That's impressive. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to turn the show over here to Dennis and Angela, just some final thoughts, and then we'll get yours as well before we kind of begin to wrap up. So, Angela or Dennis.
Oh,
Well,
go ahead,
I'll kick it off. So, Michael, first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You know, you don't know this about me, but I advise a bunch of students at Point Park and in the School of Business, and you know, hospitality and all that kind of stuff is part of what I do. I have students that are going in this direction, and I think, first of all, for me as somebody who advises these programs, you know, you've given me a little bit more confidence just for my students to be in it. It seems scary right now for people to be in a lot of different goals, right? Like just even for my freshmen that started this fall, I tell them all the time, you guys should be so proud. If there was ever a time to just quit your dreams, to not move forward, 2020 sounds like a fair enough excuse to me, right? So I know we wanted to maybe stop with the hard questions, and this may be a hard question, but I was just curious, Michael, with your experience, background, and just the comfort you've provided me, is there any kind of encouragement or comfort that you would give to the students across the country that are pursuing degrees in hospitality, in business, and things like that, that are getting hit hard? And as Dennis and others have said, this isn't going to last forever, but things will carry on that we're not used to. Do you have any words of wisdom or encouragement for students heading into this industry that might be nervous?
Yeah, I think we as humans have a desire to congregate, to commune together, and that is what the hospitality industry is. Whether you're in a hotel, whether you're in restaurants, you know, whether you're working on cruise ships, you know, it's about providing a service and being of service to guests and providing an experience. And I think that that will return. We have an innate human desire to want to be with people, to want to be around people, to want to share food with people. Cultures get told, you know, traditions get passed down through food and whatnot, and that will happen again. That will happen again, and we need you, and we need everybody that has a desire or an inkling of passion to be involved in this business, to help our business, our industry return and you know, continue through the future.
Well, Michael, sorry.
It's okay.
Michael, as a foodie and not working in the industry, but participating, I would like to say that I appreciate your passion and your contributions to the industry. And I also appreciate your leadership style. So, I mean, we could keep going on and on and on, because you've been such a great guest, and I'm sure we're going to have you back on again. I think that this was wonderful. There's two things I'm just going to remind you of or suggest. Hey, we need to get a T-shirt called The Fixer and get it out there with your company on it. And also, don't forget, I'll be sending you my application here soon. Okay?
All right. Yeah.
It's been great having you.
Thanks. It's really been great to be here, guys. Thank you so much. I always need a good dining guest, so you know, hey, I'm open. I'm open.
Well, I think we certainly have 3 individuals that will be certainly getting your number. So anytime we'll make the time for it. But how can, like you said, our audience stay connected with you and the work you're doing in the region, you know, just moving forward?
I'm currently working on you know, my Instagram page, but I am working on that and working on my website at the moment with Brave Hospitality. Other than that, I mean, you can find me on Instagram at MichaelG78. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Well, we will certainly make sure that we include your contact in our show notes. And again, as we mentioned, we would love to have you come back. You know, your demeanor, I think, in an industry that is kind of being built as the customer is experiencing it. You know, it's a really tactile environment where, you know, the food, the energy, the people, the environment, like that's all being created, and it's being created by individuals like yourself who are putting so much time and dedication and thought to every element, you know, that you experience. And that's somebody, like you said, who really is appreciative of their craft, and truly, like you said, you are a connoisseur of that field. And you know, I think it comes back to, you know, the quote that I often come back to think about is this idea that, you know, success seems to be always connected with action. And despite what might be happening in an environment, successful people keep moving. You know, they may make mistakes, but they don't quit. And you clearly typify this quote. And, you know, I want to thank you for illuminating these characteristics. You know, because again, it's synonymous across industry, and you're doing a wonderful job, like I said, in the field that you're in. And we're very gracious for you to be here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Well, listeners, everybody, thank you again for joining us and joining Michael here for our conversation. And again, we look forward to having you on a future episode. And we also thank you for your continued support of our podcast and our show, because without you, we wouldn't be able to do what we do and bring you these amazing conversations. And we, along with Michael, look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Thank you, everybody. Take care.